Welcome to the show. Today's topic is setting effective boundaries. Let's start by talking about what are boundaries. People know if they heard the term, they know they exist, but most people really cannot describe it if asked to. You might think of boundaries as something like a property line used to keep people out. But boundaries are not rigid lines drawn in the sand that are clear for us to see. You find them when you bump up against a boundary. So boundaries can be seen as a way to take care of ourselves. When you understand how to set and maintain healthy boundaries, you can avoid the feelings of resentment, disappointment, and anger that build up when limits have been pushed, whether it's yours being pushed or you pushing somebody else's. There's different kinds of boundaries. Boundaries can take many forms. They range from being really rigid and strict to appearing almost non-existent. So let's talk about if you have more rigid boundaries, these are some things you might exhibit. You keep others at a distance. You seem detached even with intimate partners. You have few close relationships and you avoid close relationships. But if you have loose or open boundaries, these are some traits you might exhibit. You get involved with others' problems. You find it difficult to say no to other people's requests. You overshare personal information with others, and you seek to please others out of fear of rejection. So you can see that both of those, one extreme or the other has negative aspects. So what we want to really aim for is healthy boundaries, and that's what we're talking about primarily today. A person with healthy boundaries understands that making their expectations clear helps in two ways. First, it establishes the behavior you will accept from others and won't accept, and it establishes what behavior other people can expect from you. So if you have healthy boundaries, here are traits you exhibit. You share personal information appropriately, not too much, not too little. You understand your personal needs and wants and know how to communicate them. You value your own opinions and you accept it when others tell you no. Many of us have a mix of boundaries. So some of ours are rigid, some of them are loose, some of them are healthy. For example, you might have strict boundaries at work and more loose ones at home or with family and friends. There might even be different boundaries based on a person's culture. And for some example, some cultures find that sharing personal information is not appropriate at any time, while in other cultures, sharing might be encouraged at all times. So let's talk about the types of boundaries that exist. Building healthy boundaries, whether you're at home, at work, or hanging out with friends, hinges on understanding the types of boundaries. So the 5 types are, number 1, physical. This refers to your personal space. Some people's personal space is their actual body, and some people's is 5 feet out or more. Your privacy, your body. You might be someone who's comfortable with public displays of affection, hugs, kisses, hand holding, or you might be someone who prefers not to be touched in public. That's your boundary. The second one is sexual. These are your expectations concerning intimacy. Sexual comments and touches might be uncomfortable for you. Third is intellectual. These boundaries concern your thoughts and beliefs. Intellectual boundaries are not respected when someone dismisses another person's ideas and opinions. This is something we're experiencing in our country very powerfully right now with the political discord, is people not wanting to listen to other people's thoughts, not telling them they're wrong, shutting them down. So that is not respecting people's boundaries. It's crossing it, it's disrespecting, something to think about. Another one is emotional. This refers to a person's feelings. You might not feel comfortable sharing your feelings about everything with a friend or a partner. Instead, you prefer to gradually share over time. And the 5th one is financial. This one, as you guessed, it's all about money. If you like to save money, not spend it on trendy fashions, you might not want to loan money to a friend who does. You might also, I know in my family, there's this, with my parents and a couple siblings, that you just never talk about money. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about income or things you've purchased, costs of things. It's just like a family boundary, when you get ready to establish your boundaries, be sure to take each one of those into account. Think about them all because they're important. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty of personal boundaries. In a nutshell, it's knowing how to separate your feelings from someone else's. As human beings, we have our own thoughts, our memories, our experiences we've lived. Sometimes that can become very blurred with someone else's, especially a sibling, a parent, somebody you've been with your whole life. Boundaries are healthy for helping you identify you as you and keep that space. When physical boundaries get crossed, your mental security alarms start to go off. You have to rely on that internal alert system to determine when your emotional and psychological boundaries are infringed upon. When you feel your body like tense up, you feel yourself pull away, you feel a little bit repulsed or shocked. That is your internal alert system. For example, if you come away from a meeting or telephone conversation with someone feeling depleted, you're anxious or wound up, there's probably been boundaries being breached, whether it was you or them or both. Setting boundaries is really helpful for far more than just defining who we are. Having them in place limits your exposure to stress and the body's production of adrenaline and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. I've talked about it before. Too much cortisol running through my body was destroying my organs, and there's plenty of other people who it went further than that. So it's something you want to really limit happening in your body. And so setting boundaries protects your mental well-being. Experts agree that well-being is a key factor because a lack of boundaries can lead to emotional and physical fatigue, especially if you have to deal with the exhausting behaviors of others. People who continuously disrespect you by ignoring your boundaries, knowingly stepping over them, tromping over them gleefully, it's very stressful. So it doesn't end there, though. Boundaries promote a sense of autonomy and what you're in control of as far as possible and what you want and what you don't want. And they can also keep you safe in relationships at home, at work, with partners. And that's really important. Research shows that blurred boundaries, particularly between work and home life, are linked to unhealthier lifestyles and lower levels of happiness. And it also has a higher risk of family conflict. So you want to get yours in check. And that's kind of like, how much are you going to talk about work and work stressors when you get home? A lot of people like to use their drive home or walk home, ride home, whatever you're doing, as a time to segue, to leave behind their work. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to be focused on home. And I'm going to leave those stressors behind me while I'm home. Here are 10 ways that you can set and maintain good boundaries, because it's one thing to set them, but I swear maintaining them is where most of us need assistance because it's hard. Not sure about how to go about creating boundaries or effectively holding them. Maybe you've already set some. And like I said before, people are walking all over them. Here are some great approaches. Number one, enjoy some self-reflection. I talk about this a lot because nothing replaces self-reflection. To successfully introduce and set boundaries, you've got to understand why each one is important to you and how they'll benefit your emotional well-being. Take some time to really look back. And often stuff happens to people, they feel uncomfortable, but they're not sure why. The first step is spending the time to explore what's happening to you. So perhaps you're being asked to do something. I'm going to use an example that a friend of a friend told me about, that they had a child who was working for an employer who kept asking them to do personal chores for them. Pick up my dry cleaning, get my car washed. Their job title had nothing to do with anything like that. They didn't have one of those and other tasks as assigned kind of jobs. And it was infringing on their ability to do the job they were hired for. They would tell their supervisor, it's not that I don't want to be helpful, but this is not part of my job. And the employer continued to just cross that boundary and use them as a personal assistant as well. So that's something they had to really sit back and think about, like, is it important enough for me? I've asked numerous times. This supervisor is not changing their ways and makes it very clear they're not going to. Can I tolerate this? Can I live with the situation as it is now? Or do I need to leave the job? And they ended up leaving the job. And hearing everything that was told to me, I think that was a very healthy decision to make, because you can't control another person. You can only control yourself. You set these boundaries, and asking somebody to treat you in a particular way and not treat you in other ways, if they won't respect it, that's when you have a decision to make. Again, can I live with the situation as it is if I've already tried multiple times, or do I need to change this whole setting? So another one is to start small. If you don't have any boundaries in place already, and a lot of people don't, the prospect of introducing them might seem really overwhelming. You might be afraid. Just build slowly. Doing so allows you to take things at a more comfortable pace for yourself, and it provides time to reflect on whether it's heading in the right direction or if you need to make some tweaks. I suggest setting one boundary. Think about what is a boundary that you really feel is important for you, and introduce that one, and introduce it to everyone it's relevant to, anyone who hasn't been treating you in that way already. You don't need to tell them in advance, from now on, I want you to do this. But when they cross the boundary, say, I just want to let you know, when you do that, I'm very uncomfortable. I will not respond to that in future. I need you to talk to me this way, or I need you to avoid that topic. We're just not going to discuss that topic. Expect pushback. Once you've had no boundaries or poor, loose boundaries, and especially if you've got people who are narcissistic, that type of personality around you, they are going to push back, and they might push back hard. You need to be very firm, like your feet are in concrete with that boundary, and you just continue to repeat it. I've mentioned this before to you, and I want to say it again. I'm not going to allow you to speak to me that way. If you'd like to talk, calm down and let me know when you're ready to have a adult conversation about this, whatever it may be. And if they continue to disrespect that, that tells you something about them. You're not doing something wrong. You are setting a boundary. Have you ever heard that saying, people treat you the way that you taught them to treat you? I do think there's a lot of truth to it. It's mostly subconscious teaching, of course, but what we've allowed to happen, we're training them that it's okay to do that. If they don't, like, let's say you have a romantic partner who doesn't acknowledge your birthday, doesn't give you gifts, doesn't do anything special or romantic, and it hurts your feelings, and they know it, and they continue to do it, and you don't say anything. You just sort of seethe inside and cry and get hurt in private. Nothing's going to change, probably. So then you say to them, Valentine's Day is coming up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do to show me your love for me. I'm so excited. You're setting a boundary with them. You expect them to acknowledge that day in some way. Now it's up to them. The ball's in their court. If they do something nice for you, you're going to verbally reinforce that. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. It's just what my heart needed. It really touched me. If they ignore it, do nothing or next to nothing, then you need to sit down and say, I did let you know that Valentine's Day was important to me, and that I really needed to see a gesture, a clear gesture of love and affection from you. And I didn't get that. And I just wondered why. And see what they have to say. Don't let them just get away with that. I'm not saying gifts are what the world revolves around by any long shot. It's just an example. Things that I've seen with clients, heard with clients. Everyday situations require boundaries. So you need to think about how you've allowed people to treat you, how you've allowed them to not treat you, not do things that are really expected in certain situations, and then figure out the most important one and introduce that. And once that's being respected, or you've determined that person doesn't have the capability of respecting me as a person and therefore my boundaries, and decided what you're going to do about that, then you go to the next boundary. It may be too late for some of this, but setting them early is important. The first time somebody crosses a boundary, they didn't know you had that boundary. And very often these boundaries are socially acceptable behavior that people should know, but there's certain people who will always be abusive of that until they're called out on it, or the person cuts them out of their life, whatever it takes to end it. Sometimes it can be really hard putting boundaries in place in pre-existing relationships. And I'm going to go back to family, especially. You've been with them your whole life. They're used to you in one way, and maybe you've been a bit of a doormat. You've allowed them to abuse you in multiple ways. You've taken it. It hurts you. They see it hurts you. They don't care. They're not treating any different. The people you spend the most time around are the ones you need to really think about the boundary first. Like, where do I want to set a boundary with these people? Let's say your whole family has a habit of talking over you. They don't listen to you. They interrupt you. They talk right over you like they don't even hear you. That's very disrespectful and dismissive. And you can say, excuse me, I wasn't done speaking. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me finish my thought. And if they interrupt you again, I'm so sorry, excuse me, but I did say that I wasn't finished speaking. I'd appreciate the courtesy of letting me finish my thought. I'm speaking. And if they continue to do it, I mean, it could take months or even years to see things turn around with existing relationships with difficult people. And you're just going to have to be very consistent with it. Don't backslide and let them go, oh, well, this one time I won't push it. Be consistent, be appropriate, be calm, but continue to uphold that boundary. By setting boundaries and expectations from the very beginning, the first time someone crosses a boundary, everyone knows where they stand. It's so much less likely they're going to do that again, that there's going to be feelings of hurt, confusion, and frustration. It's just much less likely. So you may think you need to just wait till you can't take it anymore, but you're more likely to blow up if you do that. Number 4, be consistent. I mentioned that a moment ago, but if you let boundaries slide, people get confused. It encourages bad behavior on their part and leads to them respecting you less. So keep things consistent and steady. Again, be calm, be adult, be appropriate in what you say and how you handle it. No matter what their stance is, if they turn into children before your eyes, you turning into a child in return is not going to help the situation. You want to try to reinforce your original thresholds and beliefs and just ensure those lines remain clearly established. And just be prepared for pushback from existing relationships when you introduce boundaries later. It's going to happen. And the really toxic people are going to be not nice about it at all, but you just keep, again, restating it. I've let you know what that boundary is. And if you continue to cross it, I'm not going to want to be around you. I'm going to choose to not be around you. I mean, that's really what it can come down to for many people, because it's self-abuse to continue to be around somebody who has disrespect for you. So it's not you doing something wrong. It's them not being willing to treat you in a respectful way. The next one is creating a framework. Boundaries vary based on the type of relationship we're talking about. But if you find it helpful, there's no reason not to have a few basic ones in place that you can have for all relationships. So what if you need alone time and you're just not being given to you? So you could say to your partner, I realize that I need more time alone. I need to do some meditation, some self-reflection. I need to get myself balanced. And I'm happy to give that to you as well. How can we work that out so I can have an hour or two alone each week? What would work for you? So you're telling them that you need this is, and why you need it. And you're respecting them and saying, acknowledging they might need the same thing. And I'm willing to do it for you. Getting their input. How can we work this out? Now, if they say you don't need alone time, that's a bunch of garbage, blah, 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 disrespect. So again, as I said, I've realized I do need that alone time and I'm going to have it. I'd prefer to work with you to come up with a way to make this happen. Otherwise, I'll do that on my own. So you're being firm with them that this is going to happen with your input or without your input, but this is what I need. This boundary can apply whether you live with a partner, you have a busy social schedule with friends or close family, whatever it may be. It's okay to ask for these things. That's just one example. The next thing is feel free to add more. So you could have relationships where boundaries are already in place. Let's use a work one this time. Let's say that you've asked people to put incoming paperwork into a specific bin. But there's certain people you work with who toss it on your desk wherever it may land, and you end up with a clutter of paper all over your desk that just disturbs your day, and you have to then organize it, put it into the basket. It's just such a simple thing. If somebody says, please put it into this basket, a normal person's going to say, no problem, I'll put it in the basket. And they might forget once in a while, but they're going to do it. But consider those like minimum things. So colleagues are going to let you know about their boundaries. Like, if my door is closed, I prefer you don't knock, wait till my door is open. And then you need to respect that outside of emergency situations. But it's okay to add some others later. This didn't happen to me, but it happened to my dentist friend that I shared an office with when I worked in mental health. Somebody was getting into his candy stash. It's funny to hear about a dentist with a candy stash, isn't it? But he would start catching them and saying, I don't want, it's not okay for you to get into my candy. Ask me first. I'll be happy to give you some, but ask me first. And he got some pushback on that and ended up putting it in a locked cabinet, because there were people who weren't respecting it. So it can be little things, it can be big things. And if something's bothering you, you know that it's a boundary issue. Doing this can really enhance your performance, setting additional boundaries as needed. And Austrian researchers found that employees who introduced personal workplace boundaries felt more empowered. And don't we all want to feel more empowered in our lives? The next one is be aware when you're on social media. I know some people who post pictures of all kinds of things, like their spouse in the hospital getting ready to have a procedure, are still unconscious from the anesthesia. And then the spouse is like, I can't believe you posted that. Why did you do that? I didn't think you'd mind. You can post the pictures you want of yourself, but you should always ask before you post pictures of others. And especially if there's anything in there that might even a chance embarrass that person, because they have different boundaries than you do. So if you two together decide, let's post some couples posties, fine, do it. The two of you together, a bunch of selfies you took. But if you posted a bunch and some of them weren't very flattering of your partner, they might not be very happy with you. So think about these things before you post anything other than yourself on social media. And that goes for sharing information that could be considered very personal by others or embarrassing by others. So you want to stick to you, things about you, and let others post things about themselves whenever possible. And if somebody says to you, I don't like that you posted that and you didn't even talk to me first, if you just go, oh, it's fine, you're disrespecting their boundary. And the same goes if somebody does that to you. So the world is fraught with potential crossing boundaries, and some of them are huge and some of them are medium, and then there's the small ones, but it's just part of civilization to set boundaries and respect them. The next one is communications. It's critical when it comes to boundaries, especially if someone consistently oversteps your boundaries. While you might need to raise your concerns, these discussions don't have to be confrontational. If you have a friend who sends you text messages nonstop and you said, I'm really not a texter, do you mind sending me, it would be better if you send me one email a day, no more than that, and put everything in one email. And that way it doesn't interrupt my attention as I'm concentrating, and I can respond to it when I have a break. Then they send you 9, 10 more texts that day or the next day. I did ask you, please don't text me. I'm going to ask you to email me instead. I've had this situation because I use my work phone for calls with clients a lot. If somebody texts me, it pops up in the middle of the session. And if I'm in a trance state where I'm really focusing very intensely, it pulls me right out of it. So I tell people, please email me, don't text me. And there's been some people who have abused it. And I've had to say, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have you limited to email. And then I block them in my phone. They can email me, but they're not going to be able to text me because it's not fair to my other clients or to me. It disrupts my ability to provide my clients for the time that they've hired me for, to give them what they need. So I do give people several chances, and I encourage you to do that as well, because we aren't perfect. None of us are perfect. We forget. That's legitimate. That's just being human. But if somebody says, I don't like email, then they're telling you, my needs are more important than your needs. I'm going to do what I darn well please. And then I think it comes to a place where you have to consider making a change that you can control, such as me blocking those few people from texting, not from contacting me, but just from texting, because they wouldn't stop texting so much. I've actually had friends do that too. So, and you can even say, just gently highlight their behavior and assert your threshold, reassert your boundary. And I like to remind people of why. It's not like I hate, I'm just using this as an example, but it's not that I hate texting. It's not my preferred method of communication. And if it's a long text and you expect me to return a long text, I'm going to clip it and put it in an email where I can type with both hands and not try to be pecking it out. I'm not a kid, so there's a lot of things that age can make a big difference too. And just think about what you're asking somebody to do. For instance, I've got some very elderly clients who don't have computers and will never have them. And they're never going to use my online booking system. And they know that they can contact me and I'll set it up for them. I know that I don't expect them. I'm not going to be so rigid that I expect these people who've never had a computer in their life, who don't have any interest in it, to change their lifestyle for me. So that's when you need to be some flexible with things too, and just think about that. Are you being rigid for a reason? Are you being rigid for your ease? So the next one is be your biggest champion. Boy, I think this is true for everything in life. If you're not your hero, you're not your biggest champion, who is? Boundaries have to have a strong foundation, and you got to show yourself some love. And setting good boundaries is saying you think you're worthwhile and you're deserving of respect. And if you don't do that, you're going to find it difficult to put boundaries in place that protect you. So setting healthy boundaries comes down to self-worth and self-value. It doesn't take much to start encouraging that mindset either. The more you engage in activities that release feel-good hormones like exercise, singing, dancing, art, laughter, things that feed your heart, that's going to help change that internal dialogue you have within you and make you feel more deserving. And I like affirmation statements. You can write these, don't type them. Oh my gosh, showing my age. Write these out on a small piece of paper. Things like, I am worthy of love. I love myself and others love me. All these things that you want to be true. Tape it up on your bathroom mirror, your kitchen cabinet, where you're going to see it lots. Twice a day, morning and night, you're going to look yourself in the eye in the mirror, and you're going to read those 3 times like you mean it. I am worthy of love. I am loving and lovable. I have high self-esteem for myself and my boundaries, whatever you want to say. And you keep doing it until you feel it's true, till you can say it and you realize, oh my gosh, I believe that. That is true now. It's not a wishful thought. It's true. Then you can cross that one off and you're done with that one. The next one is gaining some perspective. That's so good with many things in life, though, isn't it? Not having boundaries can be detrimental to our mental health. It can lead to depression, anxiety. But going too far and overthinking them can also impact our well-being. So get a healthy level of thinking about boundaries. I like to say, I'm going to think about this for the next 10, 15 minutes and set a timer. And when I'm done with that, the timer goes off and I must do something else and think about something else, do something to distract myself, because I don't want to have these monkey mind thoughts going around in my head. Once you think about it and you come up with how you want to handle it, put it aside. And if you can't figure it out in 10 to 15 minutes, put it aside for the next day or later in the day and set aside another period of time. Don't let yourself ruminate about this on and on and on. Chances are that you're going to have a gut instinct of how you need to handle this, whether it's to have a sit down with that person who walked over your boundary, whether it's to take a longer break of time to really think about it, to let yourself get past the initial emotional reaction and then see how you feel about it, or whether it's time to have that person be limited or eliminated from your life. So it's good. You want to have your boundaries, but just don't be dictated by them. Sometimes you just got to go with your gut instinct. It's very little in life is black and white. Almost everything falls in the gray, and that's the truth. And there's danger in black and white thinking because you can be extremely rigid that way. So based on the person, the situation, all kinds of factors, you may decide that you want to handle the situation differently. You may want to respond to them crossing your boundary a different way, but never out of your initial emotional response. You can forget that we're actually pretty good at navigating most things. And we as human beings are naturally intuitive beings. And allow yourself to tune into that so that you're not going strictly by emotions. Let's talk about recognizing the boundaries of others, because this isn't just about us setting boundaries and making sure people don't continue to step over them. It's also being aware of the boundaries others set with us. So in addition to setting yours, it's important that you appreciate others' boundaries, even if they're different from your own. So how can you determine what they are? I'm going to give you, it was a fun example the other night. My friends are like, hey, we're coming from out of town. Let's meet at Cliff Castle Casino. So we usually go, we'll have dinner once in a while and we'll play some slots. So there was a lady sitting at a machine next to the one I wanted to play, and she had a mask on. And I stopped and I said, excuse me, but if I sat at that machine, would I be too close for your comfort? And she looked at me and she kind of nods and she says, that's why I'm wearing this mask. And I said, and that's why I'm asking you. And I said, no problem. She said, oh, thank you so much for asking. Because we could be thinking, I wonder if this is too close for them. Why not just ask? I'm sorry, but people have all kinds of feelings about the pandemic right now. I didn't have a mask on. It's not because I don't think masks are important. It's because I feel highly protected right now. But when you see somebody has a mask on, why not just say, hey, do you mind if I'm here? Because it's within, 5 feet of you. I mean, that's just one example, but it happened the other night. And I thought, yeah, I'm glad I asked that. I'm really glad I asked instead of just sitting and wondering whether it was freaking her out or upsetting her in some way. There's no magic science for this, but this respect for one another and our differences and our boundaries is part, again, of what makes a civilization instead of chaos. There's nothing wrong with respecting boundaries, though they may be very different from your own. There's a lot right with that. There's a lot of potential for wonderful growth for yourself, other people, and the planet in that. If you're concerned or unsure, just ask them. And it doesn't have to be awkward. Yeah, like I just said, do you mind if I sit here? Is this going to be too close? Or can I message you later? Are you going to be too busy? I like to ask people, text them, is this a good time to talk? Especially if I know, like me, that they use their phone for various things. If they've asked me to text first, I'm going to text first. Just general discussion instead of assuming. Say something like, when's a good time for me to drop by? They may have said, just drop by Sunday. It's still a good idea to ask, what would be a convenient time for me to stop by? It just helps put framework in place. I'm respecting you. You're more likely to respect me. We're cordial to one another. It's also about using your common sense. Let's say your partner really hates social media, like wants nothing to do with it, and you are all over it. You're the social media queen. And let's say you just went on vacation and you got some wonderful couple selfies taken, and you're plastering those all over Facebook and Instagram, and your partner hears about it from somebody and says, I can't believe you posted that one. This did not happen, but this is a real picture. My sister and her husband went on a cruise, and in one of their stops, they had a picture taken, and it had a special effect to it that they didn't know what it was going to be, but it made my sister look like a giant and her husband look like this little tiny guy in a chair. And she hates that picture. And I think about that, like it got put on, somebody put it on social media, and I don't think she was very pleased about that. And it can happen with anybody. So if there's even a remote chance somebody's not going to want that picture up, please ask them first. If you ask your friend or partner, hey, I'm going to go see this movie. Do you want to go see it with me? And they say, no, I'm really not interested. Don't try to change their mind. They just set a boundary with you. And it's one of those low level ones. But here's how you can, in everyday life, easily show your respect for somebody in your life is to say, okay, I'll find somebody to go with me, or I'll go alone and we'll catch the next one. Tell me something coming up that you want to see, and maybe we can go see that together. Repeatedly violating someone's boundaries breeds resentment, contempt, and it can cause people to withdraw from you. They can cut you right out of their life. It's helpful to take a moment to think before you act. Boy, I think we could tattoo that on somewhere where we all see it all day, every day. It's always helpful to think before you act. I want to recap this briefly here. Boundaries are essential for various reasons, and they look different to everyone. And again, it's not like something you can read written in front of somebody. Oh, this person has boundaries about this. You might be concerned that setting them makes you seem unfriendly or difficult, but it's possible to maintain boundaries without upsetting those you care about. Honestly, you'll have less misunderstandings, less drama. Don't feel guilty about setting boundaries. They're essentially a form of self-care. You're saying, I'm worthy. I'm going to set some rules for myself. And then you actively look to incorporate other elements of this into your lives on a daily basis. From eating a balanced diet to exercising, why is it any different to set boundaries? It's taking care of yourself, and you have every right to do that. Only you know what your boundaries are. Only you really know when people start to offend you or upset you. It might take some time and consideration to decipher what the boundaries are that are most important to you and the best ways you're going to implement them. But your mental well-being is going to appreciate the efforts you put into that. For most of the people that I see in my practice, they come to me for a variety of reasons, and I do a lot of spiritual counseling, and a lot of times boundaries comes up in that because we're talking about relationships a lot, and they're trying to figure out a way to lovingly and at a high frequency change a situation between themselves and a loved one. And often boundaries are what's really at the core of this. So there's so many examples I could set, and I'm sure that you've got plenty running through your head from your own life, just from what I've talked about today. And it can bring up a lot of questions. And I say this every time, and I mean it. If you have questions about the information in today's show, contact me. My email is in the show description, no matter what platform you're viewing or listening this to. So it's easy to reach out to me. And my website is ivoryangelicmedium.com. But I want to be sure to tell you too that I have a book out that helps you see, hear, feel, communicate with your angels, and receive their full guidance. It's called Let Your Angels Lead. It's available on Amazon. It's still at the introductory price. Take advantage of that. I appreciate you tuning in so much. So glad to have you here. Next Sunday, the topic is going to be what it's like to be a medium. And I have a guest coming on. It's my friend Terri-Ann Russell, a fellow medium. She works with me at Sedona Soul Sisters. And it's going to be interesting. If you have questions or you've always wondered something about being a medium, that's your chance. You'll be able to tune in live and ask us your questions or share your own experiences about being a medium if you are. You know, whether you do it professionally or not, it's really not important on this show. So in the meantime, may your angels surround you. May your angels protect you every moment, every day of your life. Have a beautiful week.